And welcome again to Cottage Talk. I am Russ Goldman. Joining me right now is Tony Gold. We are the Gold Dust Twins. We are back for another transfer window show, and we're going to talk about the latest on Emile Smith Rowe. I was hoping, Tony, by the time we started the show that I'd be talking about a signing. Nothing is official yet because we have not seen anything come over from Fulham yet. Everything is pointing in that direction that he is going to be a Fulham player. It's just a matter of them making it official. And we're going to talk a lot about that. But before we do that, we have some breaking news that we're going to discuss. I also want to mention, if you're watching live, please feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching live and haven't already, please do. We would really appreciate that. Also, please feel free to comment on the show for whatever you want to talk about. We'll try to get to that as well. We're going to talk a lot about the transfer window in the show. We'll talk about Emile Smith Rowe, a Spanish center back we are going to start with. We're going to talk about Ryan Sessegnon officially signing with Fulham, Scott McTominay, a lot of stuff, Tony. But let's start with the breaking news that just happened, I want to say about 45 minutes ago. I saw this and my head started to spin. This is according to Fabrizio Romano. Quote, Fulham agreed deal to sign center back Jorge Cuenca from Villarreal. Here we go. His signature line, unquote. Okay, Tony, so I've done a little background on him. Neither one of us really know a lot about this player. We don't. I'm going to share some information from WhoScored.com about strengths and weaknesses, but here are the things I do know. He's 6'2". He played many matches last year for a good Villarreal side, so there are some good qualities there. He's also left-sided. So he can play left back, and he could probably play left-sided center back. So I don't see this as a potential replacement at right center back. I see this as potentially a Tim Ream replacement. That's where I'm looking at it, and maybe a backup to Anthony Robinson because he can play left back. Now, nothing's official, as we learned with Fulham. This came out of nowhere. First of all, what are your thoughts when you saw this news? Because this came out of left field, as we would say over here.
Yeah, I mean, this is a player that, as you say, had no idea about, not even been mentioned in the last 4 or 5 months. This has just popped up out of nowhere. Look, at the end of the day, it's an area where I think we need to strengthen 100%. He's not going to be a starter, I wouldn't imagine. He's someone that's going to come in to bolster that area, probably as cover for Bassi. Because he is left-footed, he can play on that side. But look, he's got decent enough potential, and he's obviously played at a reasonably good level in terms of the fact that he's been at Villarreal last season, played a lot of games for them. He's got Europa experience, Conference League experience. A couple of years ago, Barcelona were looking to sign him, so he's obviously got a pedigree. So look, at the end of the day, we need cover in that position. So as long as the price is right and we can, get it across the line, then it's bolstering up the squad, which is what we need at the moment. In terms of what he will bring, I wouldn't be able to tell you because I've never seen him play.
And that's the same with me. So if you're looking for analysis on how he plays, I really can't tell you because I've never seen him play. The only thing I can share with you is what I've seen from WhoScored.com, and I'm going to share it right now, Tony. This is what they say about Jorge Cuenca. Strengths, crossing, very strong. Key passes, aerial duels, and tackling, all are strengths. Weaknesses, holding on to the ball and concentration. That doesn't sound good, Tony.
He'll fit in very well then, won't he?
Exactly. Style of play, likes to play short passes, clears the ball out of the defense often, commits fouls often. He's going to fit in great at Fulham, Tony.
Yeah, look, as I say, we need cover in that position. It's not, there's not many players around that, are free or available. So they've obviously looked at him. They've obviously watched him. And he's someone that I would imagine, I mean, I can't, be absolutely sure, but Silva's probably, had people watching him, scouts watching him, and they fed back and they think that he will fit into whatever system Silva thinks that, is going to be suitable. So, listen, it's going to be one of those, isn't it? Going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, we're just going to have to see. And again, nothing's official, but this actually came from Fabrizio Romano. Even though I have my issues with him, he does break news and he does have very good sources. So I'm going to take this very seriously, as it's looking more than likely, but we'll see if it gets over the line. But what I also noticed, and I went to Transfer Market, it had its value at about £6 million. So this, I have a feeling it's not going to cost them a great deal. But as we're talking about, Tony, this screams of depth. That's what it screams to me. And there's nothing wrong with that. They need depth. Would I like a starting right center back? Absolutely. But it doesn't sound like this is that type of player.
No, I think that you can pretty much guarantee that Bassi and Diop are going to be the two that start, unless, they magic somebody else up out of nowhere in the next sort of 14 days, which, you never know with Fulham, do you? So
never.
But you'd imagine that those two will probably be, the starters, and we'll have to see where we go from there.
Okay. So let's move on. Let's talk about the latest with Emile Smith Rowe. So I've been following this carefully, and it's been interesting because I thought by now we would have a definitive announcement from Fulham Football Club. We do not. I'm just going to share what I've noticed on social media and what others have probably noticed as well, so we can talk about there. Tony, let's just start with the latest that we're hearing, and that is that he had a medical with Fulham yesterday. I've seen reports, I've seen photos of him flying out to Portugal. I've actually seen him going to the hotel that Fulham are at. Again, these are fans sharing this on social media. So it all looks like he is going to be a Fulham player, Tony. So let's just start before we talk about ambition of Fulham, because I think this is an ambitious move. I just want to talk about this whole situation of him becoming a Fulham player. This is a player you wanted. You and I talked about this a lot. So just thoughts. Let's go back again of this. Looks like it's going to happen, Tony. Are you excited that it's going to happen?
Yeah, very excited. I think I tweeted out a few weeks ago or last week that, if it all goes through and you get it over the line and he becomes a Fulham player and Silva gets to work with him and, gets the player that Arsenal had 2.5 years ago, then he will be one of the best signings in a Fulham shirt in the last 10 years. No question in my mind about that. And you've got to remember, Russ, he's still only 23 years old. So he's got his best years ahead of him. They're not behind him, they're ahead of him. So we could be seeing, he could become a fan favourite, very, very quickly. If he gets his head down, shows the right attitude, doesn't come in all big time, then I think that we've got a very special player coming across. And I think most Arsenal fans, actually, if you speak to them, they're quite gutted that he's going. But, he's one of those players that's playing in a very, very strong Arsenal side within that position. And I think that Arteta has changed the way that they play slightly. And maybe he just doesn't fit that tactical way that he sets up now with Odegaard and Rice and stuff like that. So, you know what? This is a great opportunity for him and a great opportunity for Fulham.
I'm glad that you put it that way, that maybe he doesn't fit anymore, because I talked to an Arsenal supporter today at work, and that's what we were talking about. And where does he fit? We're going to get to that in just a minute, because there are a couple of places where he could play. But what's interesting, I've not seen one negative thing said about him from an Arsenal supporter. In fact, like you said, most are upset that he is leaving because they think he is going to flourish into a great player. And if he does, like you said, this is going to be one of Fulham's best signings in the last 10 years and maybe even longer than that. That's how big this move is. So let's talk about this. I want to get your thoughts on this, because you and I talk a lot about, we want to see Fulham be ambitious. Do you think this is a sign of ambition, Tony? Because they lose Paulinho, which hurts. It hurts. But everything that I was told by a source that this was their number one target. And if you can get your number one target because you are looking to get better rather than just stay stagnant, you're looking to improve. And I think this player, who has a tremendous amount of flair. Anyone that's watched him play knows this. He gets compared to Kevin De Bruyne. That should just tell you the type of player he could be. I'm not saying he's De Bruyne, but he gets that comparison. So do you think this is a sign of ambition, Tony?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a sign of ambition, but it's like Fulham are playing a game of snakes and ladders, Russ. You know, we let a good quality player go, we bring in a good quality player. And it's frustrating in the respect that, you know, and I don't want to go over old ground because there's not really any point, but it's just to make the point. You know, if we'd held on to Mitrovic, if we'd held on to Polinia, if you're bringing in Smith Rowe, if you're then bringing in, you know, one or two other, you've suddenly got a team that's, you know, looking at top 8, you know, and competing at a really decent level. But it's almost like one out, one in. And no doubt about it, you know, he'll need to hit the ground running to get the best out of him. And so Fulham can get the best from him. But yeah, bringing in a player like that is definitely a sign of ambition, but we've got to hold on to him. And you know what happens more often than not, if he starts to play well and show that form that he showed at Arsenal, what's to say in a year, 2 years, you know, another big club comes in and off he goes, you know, right. But that is unfortunately, you know, that's the Achilles heel that we have as a football club.
It is, Tony, because you and I want to see Fulham build something special to a team that can contend for Europe each and every year. I don't mean to speak for you, but I think you want to see that as much as I want to see that. And it's hard for a club like Fulham to compete against the Big Six, and you could say just the top 10 in general because of the size. But you should do everything that you can, even if he turns into that player, to hold on to him. And if you have to flip him, you flip him. But I don't want to do that. We talked about this on the last show. We want to hold on to Emile Smith Rowe, and he could end up being an 80 million pound player. Who knows? I mean, that to me is something not out of the realm if he is the player that everyone thinks he's going to turn into. And he'll have that opportunity with Marco Silva, which everything that I've heard has been a factor in him coming to Fulham is Silva. And that makes all the sense in the world, Tony, because how many players have we seen? We're going to be talking about what position we think he's going to play. But I can name so many players that improved. You can even say Willian improved. How about Pereira? Bern Leno, you could say, improved. There are so many of them. I can't name many that have gotten worse under Silva. They've all improved. If he unlocks this player, like we said, we might have something very special in years to come.
He's got great pedigree, Russ. I think the only negative for him will be his attitude. Can he get his attitude right? Can he get his head around the fact that he's not going to be at Arsenal playing with, you know, world-class players every single day at training, every single game, that he's going to have to play a slightly different way? We know what we're getting in terms of a player because we've seen it. We know he's got the qualities. It's just about whether or not he can get his attitude, you know, right. And as I said, come in with his head down and work hard. And obviously a lot of that's going to depend on Silva because look, at the end of the day, we know that Palace were interested in him. We know that Silva's been very instrumental in getting him to where he's at right now. So they've obviously spoken, you know, they've had conversations about how Silva wants to line up, where he fits in within that. And he's obviously been sold whatever Silva's selling. So, you know, now we just need to get it over the line, get it done, get it announced. And then, you know, the excitement can start growing from there. And you know, it will be great to start, you know, seeing him involved.
Totally agree. This is from Gary Cooper. This goes to our topic of ambition. He says, only really sign of ambition if we hold on to him. And I think that goes to your point, Tony, because if you're just going to be a team that's just going to continue to turn over, if you're going to be Brighton and Hove Albion, there's nothing wrong with Brighton and Hove Albion. They've been very successful at what they're doing. But I truly believe eventually it catches up to you. It caught up to Leicester City. It caught up to Southampton. If you're going to continue, let your best players go, you can only replace them so many times. It does catch up. So
it's going to hurt you eventually.
Yes. Eventually it's going to hurt you because you can't keep doing that at 100%. Nothing's 100%. And I think Brighton have felt that last season. And I know that they're used as this wonderful model. And I've been against that Brighton model because I want to build something. I think that's a club that is trying to do it their way. But I don't think that's sustainable. I think the only way to be sustainable is to continue to build. You're going to have to spend money to do that, but I think you have to continue to improve. And Gary's right. A sign of ambition would be to hold on to Emile Smith Rowe in 2 seasons. I totally agree with that. Because if you're just going to sell him off, then you are Brighton Hove Albion, Tony.
Yeah, look, it depends on what the contract is, what they agree. I think, 23 years old, you're looking at Fulham are going to tie him down for at least 4 years, at least. But, you and I both know that contracts mean jack diddly squat these days anyway. So I would imagine they'll put in a release clause in there, more than likely, maybe, which would imagine would escalate to quite a lot of money, just so that they can cover themselves and just have that, safety net. But I think Gary's right. I think at the end of the day, and we've had this discussion before about what do the Khans want Fulham Football Club to be? What is their long-term goal?
Right. Is it just to be sustainable? Because I heard that from the beginning. I want this club to be sustainable. But I've also heard Mr. Khan, I've said this several times. I saw an interview on NBC, him saying that he wants to compete with the top 6. Well, it's time to put up or shut up. If that's what you truly want, I'm talking about Shahid. If that's what you want, you need not just Emile Smith Rowe. You need several other players to get to where you want. And you have to hold on to them to truly build something and say no to the bigger clubs. And Gary's right. Gary, you are right on this. Because if you just bring him in for a couple seasons, you're not building anything. You are just basically treading water. You're staying in the league. You're staying competitive. But I've said this to you many times, Tony. I want better for Fulham. I want more for Fulham. And I would hope that the Khans want more. And I think that they do. All right, let's move on a little bit because I want to talk about positions. And I saw this from Combe. This goes to our discussion here. Combe says, will ESR coming in be detrimental to Andreas' minutes, or could it even mean Pereira is leaving? Interesting topic. I don't have the answer for that. But what I do have is a discussion that we can talk about. And it's this: what position does he play? Because I've talked to an Arsenal fan this morning. He's telling me that his best position is central. He had the number 10 shirt, and he is pretty good coming from the left, but not a left winger. So he could be most impactful probably in that number 10 role, but that's Pereira's role. So what are your thoughts? You've said to me, I'm sorry to put words in your mouth, but you've told me you think it would be a waste to put him as a left winger. So 100%. Let's talk about that.
100%. I think, Cole makes an interesting point. Look, if you're bringing Emile Smith Rowe into Fulham, he's got to play in the 10. Simple as that. I think what it will do to Pereira, I don't necessarily think it will be Pereira leaving, but what I think it will do is it will give him a kick up the jacksie, which is what I think he needs. We've discussed this, Russ. I think he coasted last season, far too many games. He was too comfortable. There was no real pressure on him. He was like, Silva's top dog in there, played pretty much every game. And he needs competition. He needs someone kicking him up the jacksie and saying, right, do you know what? You've got a bit of competition now. For me, Smith Rowe, I think when you saw him play at Arsenal, when Arteta had him, he was given that license to drift in the 10 role. Yes. And the reason for that is because he's very creative. He's got a great football brain and he's very imaginative with his passing range. And I think that's something that Fulham, have lacked in terms of the quality. He makes great driving runs off the ball. He breaks lines. He's good in the channels. I think the one thing he lacks is goals, but we seem to have I think that's something that Arteta wanted him to work on when he was at Arsenal. And that's probably another one of the reasons why, he's happy to let him go, because Odegaard plays that role and he scores goals. There's things that he needs to improve on. I don't think he's particularly great in the air. In fact, I don't think he's ever scored from a goal with his head. Yeah. And also he needs to work on his composure in front of goal and work on his crossing in wide areas. And that's why I just don't think that, he would be productive in those wide areas. Lacks a bit of maybe a yard of pace to play there. So for me, in a Fulham shirt, he's got to play in that 10 role. He's got to have the license to play in there.
Okay. If you're watching live, feel free to share your comment. Would you like to see Emile Smith Rowe, if he becomes a Fulham player, which we hope it happens, play in the number 10 role or play out wide in the Willian role? Where would you want him to play? I agree with Tony. I want him to play in the number 10 role. You're paying him all this money. I think that's where he can be most effective. You want your best players to have the most effect on the game, and that's that number 10 role. I think that would be vital, Tony. So for me, I'm with you on that. And I think that's what he would be brought in to play. You and I have also discussed, is it possible that Pereira could play the number 8 role? Could he play a little bit deeper?
Yeah. I think actually you could play him a bit deeper because he's so comfortable on the ball that, I think one of the biggest issues that we've had is playing out from the centre halves into midfield. However great Polina was when we didn't have the ball, he wasn't necessarily always the best in possession. And I think having a confident ball player in there will help us get higher up the pitch and get the ball forward. And I think definitely, as long as he's got someone alongside him in there, and again, that we'll come on to that a bit later.
Yep.
But then I don't see why he couldn't, go in there and do that.
Okay, very good. All right. Okay, Tony, let's talk about a player there's been a lot of speculation on. In fact, there just was some speculation from talkSPORT. I saw this earlier. So according to talkSPORT, Fulham are preparing a £30 million bid for Scott McTominay. Now, they actually had one earlier, I believe, that was rejected. So this would be a second bid for McTominay. And what's interesting about this is that when the Polina stuff was going down last season, it was the name of McTominay was floated around as the replacement for him. But every person I've talked to says he is not the replacement for João Polina. That's not his game. He is a different type of player. So, first of all, what are your thoughts about McTominay? Do you want him? And then we'll talk about where would he play.
I'm very skeptical about this talk, as you know. If there's any truth behind it and there's any possibility of it happening, then absolutely 100% Fulham should get the deal done. No question. 30 million, you're probably going to have to pay over the odds a little bit. You're probably looking more 35 million to get it done. Yeah. But yeah, the attributes that he has, I think he's a player that we don't have at Fulham. We don't have a player like him at Fulham. He's solid at set pieces, corners. He'll be a threat. He's another one of those players that he's very strong, offensively, but also defensively without the ball. He's got a good engine. He's a fit lad, and I think he would fit in really well into Silva's setup. And I think if you've got someone like him in that position, then you can definitely play Pereira off him and play Smith Rowe slightly higher. And it just changes, the picture on the pitch for the team, and it gives him a lot more flexibility to use players. So if there's any truth behind it, I would definitely get him in.
Okay. And what's great about him, and we haven't talked about this, is that a major benefit of McTominay, he scores a lot of goals. He scores goals.
Yeah.
He's very dangerous. So he's a player that, like you said, I don't think Fulham have that type of player. So I would be all for this. And listen, it's not my money. It's the Cons' money. If they want to spend the money, go ahead. I don't care. I know everyone's all worried about all the financial ramifications, but I do believe that once the Riverside stand is complete, that the revenue coming from that is going to help Fulham a great deal. We'll see how much. I don't know exactly how much, but I think that's going to give them some flexibility to do some things that maybe they couldn't do until this stand was built. So that's just my 2 cents on that. I don't know for sure, but I think once they have more revenue coming in, I'm hoping that they use it and, give it back to the team, put it back into the team, because that's what Mr. Khan said from the beginning. We already talked about sustainable. Well, use that revenue from the Riverside stand to make Fulham more sustainable and more dangerous. So we shall see what happens with that. So now we've talked about McTominay. So let's move on. Let's talk about Ryan Sessegnon. We've already talked about it, but now it's a done deal. It's totally complete. And I've watched the video from Ryan. I actually watched the one that the club made about 7 years ago, which was interesting about his history with Fulham. And it just shows you how much the family was invested in the club and how much the club was invested in him. So can you come home again? I think you can. And I think, as we talked about on the last show, nothing to lose and everything to gain. Here's my question, though. Does he have a chance to start on the left?
Listen, I'm first of all, I'm delighted for him because I think that he's had a really rough couple of years. You know, sometimes players take gambles in their career for obvious reasons. For Ryan, it didn't pay off at Tottenham for a lot of reasons, as we know. I think that depends on Ryan, Russ. You know, I think it depends on how fit he can get himself, how motivated he is. We know what a player he is, or what he has been in the past. Whether he can rediscover that kind of form and do it in the Premier League, because, you know, again, we know that that's a big step up from the Championship. And yeah, listen, if Robinson has a couple of off games and has a dip in form, and as I say, Ryan's pushing him, then there's absolutely no reason why he can't push. But I don't think he'll start. You know, come the start of Manchester United. I think that, you know, he's more likely to be on the bench, and maybe that might be even too soon for him at the moment. But we'll wait and see.
I think it's a great situation for him and the club. Like you said, he could totally back up our left back. He could do that, but he could also potentially be the starter at left wing to play up front, Tony. So there are a lot of different things he can do. But as we're talking about, there's no bad things you could say about the move because it's not costing them a transfer fee, Tony.
No.
It's like found money. It's like, listen, he just decided to come, and that to me is a good thing. And I think he can come home, and I'll say it again. So I am glad that Ryan Sessegnon is back in the fold, and we'll see what happens. I'm just going to share a comment here. This is from Finn here. It says Ryan is a good signing. Free and a backup to Robinson and Smith on the left. So, yeah. See, now he is talking about Smith Rowe on the left. So we shall see. We shall see where he ends up playing. Okay. All right. Coming up next, Tony and I are going to visit again our discussion on Andre. Okay, Tony. So you and I have talked a lot about this. Now, what's interesting about the Andre situation, I really thought Andre deal was going to happen. And there's been all these different reports coming from Brazil. In fact, I was in New York City with Dan Crawford from HamIan.com, and I actually jokingly asked him if he could fly to LA and pick up Emile Smith Rowe, and on his way back, go to Brazil and get Andre, because I want these players in-house. Especially, I want Andre. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I've only seen highlights of Andre. I don't know how great this player is. I don't know if his game translate to the Premier League. I'll let the Fulham scouts, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that, right? I will definitely give them their chops on this because they would know better than myself. But what's frustrating here is this has been going for such a long period of time. And I think where we're at, if you go based on the speculation, Tony, they're haggling over £5 million, basically. That's where we are on this. The deal seems to have stalled, and it looks like Fulham are just going to wait this out a little bit. And I even saw reportedly that Fluminense had already found their replacement for Andre. They're ready to go, but they're playing hardball. So you have two sides playing hardball. And I've said this to you, and I want to give Tony Khan credit where credit is due with some of the moves that he's made. And I know a little bit about Tony's history, and I've talked to Tony when he was on the show, and knows that he's fairly close, him and his father, to the Kraft family here in the Boston area, and how they do business. It's kind of similar to how Fulham and the Jaguars do business. They do it very similarly. They like to win deals. They want to win the deal. They don't want to give in. And I think that's what's going on here, Tony, that Fluminense want more money and Fulham aren't budging. So what do? Do you wait it out to the end of the window? Do you risk another club coming in for him? What do you do? So I want to get your thoughts on this, because there's a big part of me that understands what the Cons are doing here because it's business, but I want the player in. I want players in. So as a fan, I don't want them to wait. I don't care about the £5 million, but it's not my money. It's their money.
Yeah, look, the club have obviously, watched him quite extensively, and they feel that he fits, Silva's profile in terms of what he can bring. I think that there's two things behind this, Russ, and obviously we won't know the full facts because we're not involved in the negotiations and the chat and everything else. Look, if they're haggling over 5 million, then obviously that's going to come down to the Khan's pride, whether or not they're willing to push the boat out. As you say, it's not our money, it's their money, and they'll spend it however they feel, is the right place to do that. I would question whether or not Andre actually wants this move. I'm not convinced that he actually wants this move, because if he was that hell-bent on it, he would be putting pressure on Fluminense, on his agent, to get it over the line and get it done. And you don't hear anything from the player at all. Nothing. No, you don't. And that is a little bit concerning. But I want to share this comment because I saw this on social media. And Gary, I know that you mean Andre, says apparently Andre omitted for next Fluminense game. Fulham after up 25 million with 5 million add-ons. I have not heard they've done that, but if that's true, we'll see where that takes the situation. For me, if you're haggling over 5 million and you're doing it in add-ons, maybe that's the way to do this. I've not seen that, Gary. So thank you for sharing that. I don't know if you've seen it in any particular media outlet, but if that's the case, well, it's speculation. Well, I'd like to see what happens with that. But the contrary is my friend Chris here. He says, so long as there's not a queue of clubs chasing him, hold firm and see if a deal can be done. So I understand where he's coming from. But Chris, your club is one of the clubs that were looking at him, and you haven't pulled the trigger. That's Liverpool. Chris is a Liverpool supporter. So does it also give you one of the most drawn out, transfers in a long time? I mean, we've been linked with this player for such a long time.
18 months, I think it is. It's crazy.
And so, I think Chris is right. You can hold firm, but for how long? As I say, I don't think the player is overly keen on wanting the deal. I think he wants a bigger move to a bigger club. I just get that impression, Russ. I just get that feeling. Because,
I'm there with you. I think he wants to go to Liverpool. I think Liverpool pulled out, and I think he might have. Again, it's just based on the fact that he's not pushing this. So maybe I'm jumping to conclusions. Maybe we're jumping to conclusions that he wants a bigger club, but this hasn't gone down yet. So something's stopping it, and maybe it's just Fulham. But I'm going to share this. This is funny. This is from Fulham and Dayton. This is like Dwight Gale and Diego Forlan fiasco. Yeah. So, Dwight Gale thing just went on and on and on and on. I mean, that was just crazy. But I will share this because another situation has gone cold, because Fulham at one point were interested in Vinny Souza from Sheffield United. Then I saw him linked to one of the Italian sides that was getting close. Now, what's interesting about Souza, Tony, is that Souza is really a replacement for Paulinho. Andre really isn't. Andre would change how Fulham play. So this all goes down to, what do they want? Do they want just someone that can do exactly what Paulinho does? Then I would go all in on Souza. But if they want a player that is more dynamic, then you probably go with a player like Andre, because he's going to be more dynamic. So it's interesting. I don't exactly know what they're doing, because we don't know. We're not in there. We don't exactly know what is in Silva's mind, what's in Tony's mind, what's in Alistair McIntosh's mind, and the whole recruitment team. What do they want for this position? When they decided to let Paulinho go? A plan. I'm serious. Did they have a plan? And if so, what was the plan? Was it to change how Fulham play with Andre? Or was it to get Andre and get a compliment to him that could, like a Sousa, to play with Andre? I don't know. But it's a really fascinating situation because I don't know how Fulham are going to play against Manchester United, Tony. Are they going to play a little bit differently without Paulinho?
Yeah, look, obviously it depends on how Silva lines up with the starting 11. I think you can pretty much guess what that will be, providing, the current players that we're being linked with go through and stuff like that. But look, he's not going to change the style of play. I don't think we're going to go to Old Trafford and park the bus and, be all defensive. He's going to go there and try and win the game. But I think that when Paulinho, when they knew that Paulinho was going, they obviously had several targets in their mind lined up. Silva must have had a list of players that he wanted and was interested in. He probably went to the Khans and said, right, we need to get this one, this one, this one, and this one. And this would be my priority in terms of order. Obviously, as you know, Russ, football doesn't always work like that. It's not always easy to get transfers through, players through, because of demands, because of the way the clubs work. It's a massive process, and it can be quite messy and quite difficult, especially when there's loads of agents involved and everything else. So that's why nowadays it takes so long to get these things over the line. But look, Andre and McTominay, are they both going to come to the club? Are they going to, if they sign McTominay, does that mean they're going to call their interest in Andre? If they sign Andre, does that mean they're not? So there's a lot still to be done.
Totally agree. That's what's interesting about everything going on. You're trying to put all the pieces together. It's almost like a domino effect. You're trying to figure out exactly what happens when they sign Emile Smith Rowe. There's another domino fall. Which direction do they go? Do they not go the Andre way? And what's interesting is that I've seen some comments here, and I'm trying to find it right now, is that this is from our friend Gary Cooper again. I would actually prefer Sousa to Andre, more accustomed to Fulham setup. Now, that's interesting because that would be true. Like I said, it would be more traditionally Fulham in the Premier League if you bring him in. But it wouldn't be more dynamic. Now, if you're bringing in Emile Smith Rowe, does that mean you're looking for a player that's more dynamic as your defensive midfielder? Maybe that's why they're focusing more on Andre than Sousa.
Look, I say I haven't seen enough of Andre really to compare. I saw a lot of Sousa, obviously, last year at Sheffield United. But, look, at the end of the day, he's still a player that got relegated, right? He played in a team that got relegated. Would he be more effective in a better side? Quite possibly. What's the difference between the two? I'm not sure. The only thing I would say is that at least he has Premier League experience now. He's had a whole season there. He knows the pace of the game. He knows how cold it gets in January. And all that. So he's accustomed. He's acclimatized. We don't know how Andre is going to acclimatise. Number one, to the Premier League, and number two, to the conditions of England. It makes a big difference.
No, definitely true. Okay, Tony. So the show's been great. I have an idea to finish up the show, and I'm going to call this section, Where Does He End Up? So I'm going to give you some young players that we've talked about on this show, and I want to get your thoughts on all the players and where you think they end up, whether it's the start of the season or the end of the transfer window. Okay. Let's start with all the stuff with Jay Stansfield. Where do you see him ending up? Do you see him at Fulham, or do you see him going out on loan, or potentially do you see him being sold? What are your thoughts on Jay Stansfield, the situation with him?
There's a lot of talk about him at the moment in the media. I take it with a pinch of salt. I can only go by what I've seen. And it looks clear to me that Silva has intentions of him being around the first team squad at the moment. So based on that, I have to assume that, unless something drastic happens between now and the start of the season, that he's in Silva's plans to be part of the squad.
Okay, so you see him as being part of the squad and fighting for a position. What would you say if even Birmingham City came in at, say, 5 million? Would you consider it?
Yes, I would.
Consider it, Tony.
And the reason I would consider it is because longevity wise, I just don't. I don't think Jay Stansfield is quite at the level for what we need him to be. And he, in my mind, he's always going to be a minimum a squad player. I don't see him being a regular, starter and someone actually that can come on and change a game. I think it's asking a lot at this stage. So ultimately, if Birmingham came in with a £5 million, then you know what? For me, it would also for Jay Stansfield. He wants to play football. You'd imagine he wants to play, so he's going to play there. So he's going to go. He's going to play. And any footballer worth his salt wants to play football. They don't just want to be a bit part player. They want to play. So I think that that's something that they would have to think about.
Okay, very good. And I'm there with you. I've said to you off air that I would consider it. I've changed my mind on this. I've completely changed my mind because I think it's okay to sell players that aren't in your plans. What I would do, what I think Fulham are going to do is that they're going to have him in Portugal, see if he is ready to fit. If he's ready to fit and be part of the setup, then I agree with you, he stays. But there's also a chance to make a judgment on him one way or another. And if the judgment is he's not going to play with us, then I think it's only right for Jay and the club to look at options for him. And I would look to sell rather than to go out on loan, Tony. I'm going to explain why. Because I think if you put him out on loan, I think it doesn't do anything. It just delays the inevitable because it tells me he's going to be sold at some point. Why put this player through a loan situation unless there's a loan with an agreement to buy? Then that's fine. A loan with an agreement to buy, that's one thing. That's what I would do. But again, I think Jay Stansfield, I agree with you, will get the opportunity to stick with the first team. And if he's good enough, then he'll be with the first team this season. But that's why I wanted to go through this exercise of talking about these young players.
The key fact here, Russ, before we move on to Tanton, is you know how long it's taken Muniz to fit into that role that Silva wants him to play. You've got to think, okay, if we're putting Stansfield in there, is he going to be able to play that role as effectively as you need him to? And I just don't think I just don't see it. I just don't see it.
Okay, no worries there, my friend. All right, let's talk about a player you and I have talked off air a great deal about, Devin Tanton. Now, where do you see him ending up by the end of the summer transfer window? Do you see him at Fulham? Do you see him out on loan? Do you see him in the under 23s again? Where does he end up?
This is a very simple one for me. If I was Silva, I would sell Tete and I'd get him in as a backup to Castagna and get him involved now. I think he's good enough. I think he's ready. He's a good young talent. I don't think he's any worse than Tete. So get him in. Let's get him involved, get him playing. So personally, if it was me, I'd have him in the squad right from the start and pushing him as giving Castagna, that sort of push.
Okay, we've talked about this in a prior episode, and I'm all for this. I would be willing to sell Kenny Tete if Silva believes Tanton's ready. And because I think Devin Tanton is going to be the right back in a few seasons. I truly believe that. This is a kid that is beyond his years. He is ready to go, I believe. But if Marco doesn't want to sell Tete, then he'll go out on loan. But I still think he has a bright future and will be Fulham's right back in a couple of seasons. I think he's that good. And I believe this next player we've talked a lot about as well, Luke De Figueiredo, I want a chance to be the starting right center back, Tony. So where do you see him? This is an interesting one because I think that he'll be in the mix. Could he go out on loan? Could he end up with the under 23s? Could he be sold? I doubt that one. So where do you see Luke De Figueiredo ending up by the end of the transfer window?
Again, for me, I think he's our most exciting prospect. I think he's an excellent player. He's got a great football brain. He's one that I would definitely be involving this season. As I say, listen, Diop's got a lot of experience. He's got a lot of Premier League experience behind him. But in terms of ability, I don't see him. I don't see Luke de Figueiredo anywhere a million miles away from Diop in that regard. In fact, I think he's technically stronger than Diop. But again, it always comes down to, how Silva is with young players, and he's not going to throw him in. There's no way he's going to throw him in. But personally, I would have him in the squad, around it. Again, pressing, pushing, training, all those things, and give him the opportunity. I want to see one or two of these youngsters this season given an opportunity.
Totally agree. I'm there with you 100%. And I'm going to share this because Chris is a Liverpool supporter. He always does this. Russ, you might have to sell some young players that will end up at Liverpool at some point. Shut up, Chris. I don't want to talk about Liverpool anymore with our young players, okay? I love you, but stop doing that. It drives me nuts. Okay. So I'm there with you on Luke. I want Luke to have a chance to be the starting right center back. I think he's good enough. I've heard the argument that he's not tall enough, Tony. But I don't think you have to be super tall to be a center back. For me,
it's an absolute nonsense.
To have the ability.
He
has the ability. You and I have seen it. We know he has the ability. The question is, does Silva trust him enough to start him from the get-go? Probably not. He's probably going to go with Diop. But I think he'll be in the mix and be involved in the first team. I truly believe that. Now, here's one that is fascinating. Josh King. Now, what really hit me, Tony, is I'm on my way to New York City on the train, and I'm reading the reports from the behind closed doors match against Watford, and Josh King is all over this. He is all over this match report, the summary of the match. And it got me to think, because I've had others tell me, look out for Josh King. And I did my homework a little bit and read more about Josh King, watched more film on Josh King. And this screams of a special young talent. And I found it fascinating to Fulham gave him a good squad number, and they also put him on their social media. That's a statement to me. So what are your thoughts about this? We've not really had a chance to watch Josh King, but do you think he has a chance to be with the first team this season, or do you think he goes out on loan? Where do you think he ends up?
Very talented boy, very talented footballer. Again, it's whether or not Silva believes that he can impact games from a technical perspective because of the position he plays. He plays in midfield, Russ. Yep. And the way that we're set up, where would he fit within that system in terms of, would Silva trust him to go in as a 10? Would he trust him to go in a little bit deeper? What would you be asking him to do? There's no doubt about his ability, but it's just how he fits in with that. So for me, he's another one that, yes, you'd want in and around the squad, but he's also a player that needs games. These young players need to play. You can't just have them sitting on the bench all season. They need to play in order to develop. So it would make sense to send him out, get experience, not necessarily in the Premier League, obviously, but even if it's in the Championship, to see how he develops and gets on in there. But yeah, again, if you've got Tanton, De Figueiredo's, King in the squad, then you're developing the youth players, but also you've got a very strong collective. But I can't see Silva doing that. Just can't see it.
It hasn't been in his makeup since he's been at Fulham. We're talking about Marco Silva. But why do you have an academy if you're not going to use the academy for your first team? And like you and I have talked about this, Josh King is a player that I think will end up playing with Fulham's first team. I actually think Tanton and De Figueiredo's will as well. But the history has not been good under Marco Silva. And I was just thinking to myself, some of the players that we have let go. Just think of some of the players that we've let go, Tony, and really have gotten nothing for. The most notable right now is Matt O'Reilly, okay? That should drive every Fulham supporter crazy. He's right there And he ends up now at Southampton for a good-sized deal. Okay, so congratulations to him because he's proved all the doubters wrong. He proved Fulham wrong. That one drives me crazy. I was trying to think of a player. I was saying to you, I couldn't think of the American player that moved on to Spain eventually, and it was Luca Della Torre. He's actually, I think he might still be at Celta Vigo. So he was at Fulham. We had Pat Roberts. We could talk about the poor situation with Pat Roberts. I think if Pat Roberts stays at Fulham, go out, his career would be different. That's just my thoughts on that. But the thing is, if you got players that you're developing, there should be two ways of using them, Tony. And you and I were talking about it last night. It's not just to develop them for the first team, but it's also to move them along in their careers and sell them on and find them, I would say, you find them a good home. You find them a good home to develop their football, but you make some money because you're developing them. And I think it's a shame that Fulham let Matt O'Reilly go. Just let him go. Just let him go. How many players does this happen to? And I think they need to do a better job of developing players, but finding the ones that they believe are going to make the first team. And the others that are on the fringes, sell them. Move them on. Don't just have them go out on loan because, as I just said before with Jay Stansfield, I think if you send him out on loan, then you're just delaying the inevitable. He's not going to play with the first team if they send him out on loan again. I truly believe that. I think they made a judgment if they send him out on loan. He's not going to play with the first team. So move him on. That's the way I look at it, Tony. But I think they need to do a better job. I'm talking about the club. If they have this wonderful academy, which they think that they have, they need to utilize it more.
Yeah, they do. Look, hundreds, if not thousands of kids get released every year from football clubs up and down the country. Even some of the most famous players have been released. You know, Harry Kane was at Arsenal and they released him when he was 14 because they felt, because of the opinions, that he wasn't going to be quick enough, he wasn't developed, whatever it was. And look what happened. You know, so players do change and develop at different times and stages and stuff like that. And obviously patience isn't something that is rife in football anymore. You know, it's about instant success, instant this, instant that. And I think Barcelona now are starting to change the way that they perceive players. You know, if I think you've seen it in the last season. If they think you're good enough, they're putting you in and they're giving you the opportunities. I think because managers now in the Premier League are so concerned about their jobs because it's so results driven, a lot of managers are fearful of taking that risk of throwing young players in because of what might happen. And I think that's the problem that, you know, that these young players have now. When they get to a certain point, managers are a bit reluctant to give them that opportunity because their job's on the line if it doesn't work out.
Right. And I totally understand that. I absolutely do, Tony. But I just want to see them utilize what they have. And I just don't know if they're doing the best job that they possibly can. But anyways, Tony, I was hoping that we would have an announcement before we ended the show of Emile Smith Rowe signing with Fulham. We don't have anything yet. I feel it's imminent, but until it's done, it's not done. But I truly believe it will get done. So before we wrap up the show, I just want to thank everyone who has watched live with us. We, at the pinnacle of the show, we've had 350 live people watching with us. So thank you, everyone who's watched live. Please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. I really want to get those YouTube numbers up. So if you are watching for the first time, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel. That would mean a lot. And like I said, right now we're up to 350 people watching live with us, Tony. It's pretty good.
Brilliant.
Okay, so before we wrap it up, any final thoughts, Tony, on the show, on what Fulham are doing?
No, listen, it's all positive stuff. You know, I think it's a little bit laboured, given that we're a couple of weeks away from the first game. But as I say, it's part and parcel now, and we just have to make sure that we get the deals that are in the pipeline done. And then obviously it's Silver's job to bring it all together, and hopefully we can go to Old Trafford first game positive and and look to get a good result. It's not going to be easy, but at least we've got something to look forward to.
Okay, I'm totally there with you. And before we get ready for that match at Old Trafford, I'm going to do another show, and we're going to talk about our starting 11, and we'll see how it all transpires. I look forward to previewing that match. I'll have a show or two before that. I also want to mention that I'm actually going away next week, so I won't be around to do an episode of Cottage Talk, but hopefully I'll be doing a show when I return and do a couple more shows. And I want to thank everyone that has really supported this show. I've gotten a lot of support. Obviously, Tony, I want to thank you because the shows we've done have been so much fun. So thank you, my friend, for doing it with me.
Thank you. It's brilliant.
Okay. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Cottage Talk. As always, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other phone supporters find us. That's going to do it for this episode. My name is Russ Goldman. He's Tony Gold. Thank you, as always, for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, part of the talkSPORT Fan Network.